Hello, fellow translators. So here we are with a brand new video to MTPE or not to MTPE. By now, if you're a translator, if you're in the translation industry, or even if you're thinking about the translation industry, you've come across MTPE, machine translation, post-editing. And by and large, I assume most of you know what that is. That means that after machine translation, you come in and you edit whatever was translated by machine. These days, that doesn't mean MTPE, but it means AIPE. In fact, I've said it before, it should be considered AIQC because it's more quality control than post-editing, but whatever. So what do you do when you get these requests? What should you do, and what do people do in general? Well, let's get into it a bit. First of all, they're not popular at all, especially for people who've been translating for a while and are suddenly confronted with this and wondering whether they should do it or not, because they obviously pay a lot less for monotonous work. They're also not popular because no one wants to admit doing them. Even when you do them, you kind of keep quiet about it because, well, you get backlash for it. Let's face it. It's interesting because I've talked to some people who have actually come up with their own AI solutions to these AI problems, i.e. they found ways in order to kind of upload whatever information there is onto MemSource, I know, and Trados, and they've come up with scripts and prompts that you can use in order to make things easier, but they kind of don't like sharing them. And here again, it's for a couple reasons. First of all, backlash again. You get quite a bit of backlash if you share stuff like this. And secondly, because if clients find out, they might want to lower the prices even more, and the prices are already quite low. And so if you show that you're even more efficient at it, then they might want to lower the prices even more. So just so you know, people are doing it, and they're finding solutions for this and figuring it out in their own way, but you're not going to hear much about it because it's sort of not really in anyone's interest to share it. In fact, they can get backlash for it, and so they'd rather keep it to themselves. So, look, you can try to accept or you cannot, but there's a right way and a wrong way to do everything. So let's go through the right way of accepting this if you decide to enter this world of MTPE or AIPE or AIQC. First of all, you shouldn't just accept. This is very different from just editing some translator's work, so you should ask several questions. First of all, you don't want the source language text. I imagine you want this no matter what the editing job is, or reviewing job, or proofreading job, or what have you. You want to ask what AI model they used, just in case you want to sort of try to recreate what they did, or at least show that you know what you're talking about. And along those lines, you want to ask them what prompt they use, because this can tell you a lot. And you can see if how serious they were, quite frankly, how much they know what they're doing, but also if they actually specified this is a legal text, if they uploaded a glossary or anything along those lines. And that's another thing you should be asking them, if they uploaded a glossary, or if they used any documentation, if they used any specific websites, if they used any specific, online dictionaries or anything along those lines. These are other things I also recommend asking, which are sort of ancillary. So basically asking if they want any ancillary services. So what do I mean by this? I mean stuff like, do they want you to create a glossary based on what you're doing and based on the new terminology or the updated terminology, stuff like that? Do they want a back translation? Do they want consistency check with other past translations and stuff like that? Etc., etc. These are all things you can do with AI. And if they're using AI, then chances are they'll appreciate this because it shows that you know what you're talking about when you talk about AI. Now, I'm not going to cover here exactly how to go about this. Likewise, I'm not going to cover the because there are certain prompts you can use and there are certain ways that you can do editing with AI and stuff like that. I'm not going to cover any of that. If you want me to cover that at a future point, feel free to let me know. But for now, I'm just answering these questions. However, these are obviously things that you can do with AI. So if you offer them, you can also get paid more, and it also shows that you know what you're talking about when it comes to AI. Now, during the job, there are a couple things to keep in mind as well, because when you're dealing with human translations and you're editing a human translation, you're sort of used to these mistakes. You're used to stuff like inconsistency, translations that are too literal maybe, or if they skip a sentence by accident, or, they might have comments or questions next to stuff they're not sure about. and they might not have understood a sentence correctly, and sort of went ahead that way. And you can sort of decipher what they understood instead. And so you find yourself correcting visible mistakes when it comes to humans, because yeah, again, skipping like a sentence. I've seen people skip a whole paragraph, and so you find yourself correcting these types of mistakes. But when it comes to AI, the mistakes are quite different. So you're doing a different job. And here you're correcting for hallucinations, first of all. And so these are things that at first glance, they look and sound great, but if you're an expert in your field, which presumably if they hire you for a certain specification, for a certain specialization or niche, then you are an expert in the field, then you'll catch that and you'll realize that it's completely false. Invented terms, sometimes they might do this, especially if they have the wrong field, and for some reason the AI thinks that we're dealing with engineering when we're actually dealing with legal translations or something like that. Failure to understand context. This goes hand in hand, especially if they did not specify that this is, a legal translation or a gaming translation or financial translation or what have you. If they use a wrong term but consistently, like they don't get a term wrong just once, but they decide to use the wrong term throughout, again, because they don't have context. And so you find yourself trying to detect a bunch of mistakes that are more invisible. They're not going to skip a whole paragraph here with AI, right? They're going to have stuff that at first glance looks correct, but with you as, in that niche, as an expert in that specialization, you'll be able to detect these mistakes. And that's what you have to do with AI. And that's basically it. I just wanted to keep this simple, and hopefully it makes sense. If you are thinking about accepting MTPE, these are the things to keep in mind when you're doing it. And hopefully it can make your life easier, despite the fact that MTPE does pay less, unfortunately. And if you do want me to cover some of the prompts and some of the ways you can sort of make your life easier and try to go through it quicker, then I'm happy to do that. But that requires a whole different video because there are a lot of caveats with that. Obviously, you can't just let AI run and just trust it to do something. You can't do that with anything. And so, yeah, it requires a whole new video. But hopefully this will help you if you're thinking about MTPE and whether you should accept it or not. You can feel free not to accept it, but those are the questions you should ask ahead of time, and that's how you should go about it if you do accept it. And hopefully you found this useful, and otherwise I'll talk to you next time. Okay, thanks, bye. Savedum.